And this is?
Jen.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us, Jen. And yeah, I'm super excited to dive into some icebreaker games with you, get to know you a little bit. And the first thing we usually do is our little trivia questions, Medicine Hat specific, of course. And so yeah, I'll just jump right in. So my first question for you is, Medicine Hat is located along which river? A, Milk River, B, the South Saskatchewan River, C, the Old Man River, or D, the Bow River?
South Saskatchewan River.
Yes, you got it. Nice. And I'm just going to make sure I got the right next one. Awesome. Great. Our next question for you is, Medicine Hat is a hallway between A, Lethbridge and Moose Jaw, B, Vancouver and Winnipeg, C, Edmonton and Bozeman, or D, Alaska and South Carolina?
Good Lord.
Maybe one of our harder ones.
Maybe all of the above.
Potentially all of the above.
Really?
The one that we have down is B, Vancouver and Winnipeg.
Okay, yeah,
But
that makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah. Awesome. I think that's good for the trivia questions. Shall we move on to the this or that? Awesome.
Oh dear.
Oh dear. Awesome. I will let you do the honors and pick the first one, pick it at random, and read it out, and we shall talk about it. Yeah, I can read it. We've got sweet or salty. Do you have a preference between sweet or salty snacks?
Probably sweet first, but I like salty too.
Yeah. Does it depend on your kind of the event or the season? Does any of that come into it for you, or is it pretty straightforward?
Doesn't really matter. Halloween is probably sweet,
Nice.
but we did buy some chips too.
Nice. Got to balance it out. That's what I find. Sometimes you just need to balance it out. Or like sweet stuff I love after dinner, personally.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. A little sweet
Dessert.
treat. Yeah. Yeah. But that's my preference. Awesome. I will pick our next one here. Whoop-a-woo. Lake or ocean?
I love the ocean.
Can you tell me more about that? Have you had experiences by the ocean, or?
Well, I had never been to the ocean until we went to, well, we made a big trip at, Disneyland and everything like that. And
Yeah.
we went to the ocean the very first time with our own kids.
Right.
So it was just amazing how big it is, how salty it is,
Yeah.
how it pulls you when you're standing in it. Yeah, and the ripples and the waves. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I would also have to say ocean. And it's interesting because we're, landlocked in Alberta. And so, no, that's really awesome that you got to take your kids there. And I mean, I'm from the UK, so surrounded by ocean, And so I guess part of me maybe misses it a little bit. But yeah, there's something about its vastness and power. And yeah, it's very humbling, I find. Yeah.
You feel very small.
Yeah, yeah. And funnily enough, I also feel the same way in like mountains, because no mountains in the UK, right? And so when I first came here, looking at mountains, I was like, ugh, that similar feeling
Yeah.
of humility. So, do you have anything else to add about your love for oceans?
No, there's always sand by the oceans, and I
Right.
love walking in the sand because, of course, I don't know, I hadn't really walked in a lot of sand before.
Yeah. It's like a natural exfoliant, I believe, right?
And then finding
Yeah.
seashells, and yeah.
Nice. Awesome. I will let you do the honors and pick our next one. What-to-do? Board game or video game? You
Oh,
a secret
gosh.
gamer?
No, board games.
Board games?
Love it, yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
Played board games with the kids all the time, and my one daughter is just like really loves board games. And really,
Nice.
yeah.
I love that, yeah. Don't get me wrong, I do appreciate online games. There can be a sense of community, but I really appreciate the in-person aspect of board games, and you can still find that community. And then it's like, you know how like there's something special about sharing meals with people, I find. And so it's like the same thing, but you're not like eating, but you're taking part in something together with board games, which I really love.
And as a family, I really think it's a nice way for family to be doing things together.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you ever get like competitive with the kids, or do you let them win? What kind of like?
Oh, it's funny, yeah. When they were little, of course, you let them win, but then when they got older, they had to hold their own.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, it got pretty competitive.
I remember playing checkers with my mom. Shout out to my mom, and she would be pretty ruthless with checkers, but I really appreciate it now in retrospect because it's like
Taught you.
it doesn't mean as much if you're like given the win. And obviously, when I was a little bit older, right? Yeah, but yeah, no. So that resonates with me.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'll pick one more, and then I think we can move on to our main attraction. What do we have here? Swim or suntan? So if we were at the ocean, what would be your preference? Go for a swim or suntan or both?
Me?
Yeah.
I thought you're first.
Oh, I can go first. Yeah. Swim or suntan? I'm not a strong swimmer, but I do enjoy swimming. So I'd probably say swim. That would be my preference.
I'm a non-swimmer,
Yeah.
so it would be the suntan, but I'm not a big suntanner either.
Oh, okay.
I do like the sun, don't
Yeah.
get me wrong, but I'm not one to lay in the sand.
There, yeah, yeah. No, that's totally fair. Awesome. Okay, we can move steadily along here. I'm just going to pull up my questions for the Tumbling Towers segment. So, yeah, we'll go one at a time. We'll try and get out a block, or you could even call out a number that you see on a tile, and we can just ask the question. Do you want to go first or me?
I'll go because
Okay, awesome.
I think I see one. I have to be steady.
Yeah.
I can't grab it.
Ooh. Oh, nice. And what number? 4? What do we got here? If you could choose to have any superpower, which would you choose?
What superpower would I have to choose? The superpower to bring peace in the world.
Nice.
It's so hard to see all the suffering that goes on and all the pollution that's happening. Guys, like, what are we doing to our world?
Yeah. So bring peace to the world. And you mentioned suffering, and is there anything in that about like peace within yourself, or are you talking specifically like for others to hopefully find peace in their circumstances, whatever they may be? Or
Peace starts with your own self.
yeah.
And peace then with yourself, and then with your family, and then peace with your community, and peace with your country, and then each country having peace with other countries.
Yeah. No, that's wonderful. If I were to have any superpower, I mean, you took like the best one, so I think if I were to go in like a more direct route of superpower, I heard about this one through friends, and it's just like the ability. It's like super small thing, so it doesn't come with a lot of responsibility, hopefully. But it would be to be able to like warm up things or cool things down with my hands at a touch. So it's like you have a cup of coffee and it goes cold, and then you just be able to heat it back up. No big deal. And yeah, I don't know. I just think that would be an interesting, practical superpower. So
Very practical.
yeah. Anyways, we'll move on.
Your turn.
There we go.
Oh yeah, that one was easy.
Question 1. What brings you joy?
I don't know. I think the biggest joy is seeing the innocence of a baby, being able to make it laugh just at will.
Yeah, that's so sweet. Yeah. And you have your own kids, so that's obviously something that you have experience with.
And grandkids.
And grandkids, nice. Is there a difference there, or is it the same? And it's just beautiful.
Oh, it's nice because when you have the grandchildren, you don't have any responsibility.
Right. Yeah, nice. Lovely. If I were to answer what brings me joy, I don't have any kids, so I don't necessarily have that experience fully. But, you know, I'm a storyteller. Like, that's what I do for my work. And I just feel very grateful to be able to make that my work. And yeah, I really enjoy telling stories and hoping that it resonates with people in some way or another. And yeah.
Well, that fits right in with cowboy poetry because
It
to me
certainly
that's all
does.
about storytelling,
Yeah,
really,
it certainly is. Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And like storytelling has many forms.
Yes.
And so I enjoy that I get to explore those. Awesome. I think you're up to pick up another one.
Oh, brother. You say I can't take him from the top.
No, not the top three.
No.
I usually just like poke around, see
know.
which ones are like.
That one's pretty tight. Goodness gracious.
There we go. Nice. That's number 8.
It is.
Awesome. What's the last picture that you took?
Well, the last picture I took was when we moved. A friend of ours, he's actually plays in our band, and he was moving from one location to the other. And we loaded everything onto the truck
Yeah.
and the trailer. And the only thing and I took a picture of it, the only thing we regret is that the rocking chair was down here. If we had to do it again, we'd put the rocking chair right up on top. And for Cowboy Poetry, we have our Bob and Betsy, and we would have sat Betsy up on top.
Ah, okay.
That's the only regret, but it just looked like the hillbillies moving because it was piled high.
Yeah.
That was the last picture.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, helping people move is always important. And then, yeah, it sounded like there were some objects from Cowboy Poetry, which potentially you'll get into later, so I might not get into that right now. The last picture that I took, I don't know. I mean, I've tried to make a habit of going for like sunset walks, and then, so I'll take pictures of sunsets. But I think the last picture that I took came back to me. I did some meal prep, so I made some like mini pizzas, and I took some pictures of that. A
Okay.
picture of that, and it was awesome. They taste great. Awesome. I'm gonna see if I can get one. There we
Oh,
go.
look at how easy that is.
Wow. And that is 7.
Yeah.
Awesome. What are you reading right now, if anything?
Well, I just finished it, and it's called Heart of the Horse. And having done the interviews and having talked to, people, barrel racers, they talk about how their horse can not only just feel their emotions, they can feel their almost feel their thoughts, and it certainly seems as though they can hear that they understand their voice.
Right.
But more than that, almost like they feel their thoughts, like it's almost like another sense that is
Yeah.
beyond what us humans can comprehend. And when I read that book, she talks about that over and over, about the various horses that she had and the connection that she had that was much deeper than a human kind of connection.
Right. Yeah, and I think those are beautiful connections that we can make with animals. And I feel like, I don't know, I'd be curious if the majority of people don't get to experience that, or for whatever reason. It could be, whatever reason, but that's really beautiful. And like the word that came to mind was like impulses, like potentially they pick up on like your impulses, or they get used to your impulses and stuff. So no, that's super beautiful.
Well, it really hit close to home because Monica Wilson had therapy horses, and when she talked about some of the changes that came about, it was just astounding. And this book talked about that too, and so like how that paralleled, and I don't even know why. It almost makes me wonder how I came to choose that book.
Right.
Like you always wonder if there's another hand somewhere in the realm of it happening.
Yeah, we were supposed to pick up that book and read it and get something of value from it. So that's beautiful. That's awesome. Yeah.
And your book?
And my book, my latest book, I am slowly but surely working my way through Indistractable. It's ironic how long it's taking me to read it. I think I'm getting very distracted while reading it. But yeah, I think it's by, I'm forgetting their name. Oh, I forget their name, I apologize. But it's called Indistractable. And it's all about
Indistractable.
Indistractable, yeah. So,
and you're saying you get distracted.
because it's taken me so long to get through it, I think I am getting distracted. But yeah, it's like a self-help book of trying to be more productive and yeah. So yeah,
Nonfiction.
yeah. I think it's my turn. Or no, is it your turn?
Unfortunately, it's mine, and look at how that's hanging.
I know.
Ay, ay, ay.
Yeah, I would just poke around and see which ones
I know.
Which ones are loose.
Which one is loose? Oh, that one's pretty good.
Nice.
19.
19.
Yeah, you have to have a steady hand.
Yeah. What do you wish someone taught you a long time ago?
Say that again.
What do you wish someone taught you a long time ago?
I don't know. A few things come to mind.
Yeah.
On a very practical sense, something that I wish I'd have learned a long time ago, and if someone had given me some guidance, is to be more, like I've had to learn by all of these mistakes, is to be more organized. So that, but that's on the very practical sense.
It resonates with me, so that's fair. Is there a less practical thing that you wish someone had taught you?
I think on the other sense, it's that to forgive, but never forget. So that forgiveness is hard on one sense, but also being aware that remembering is also an important part of the learning that happens in when you're, have to forgive someone, and the understanding that comes from it is that you don't forget, but that you learn and, I don't know, learn from it, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I get a sense of, especially in like, a healing journey, are you truly healing if you are kind of forgetting? I think, yeah, it's important to remember, and not forget. But forgiveness is a huge part of healing and growth, so that's really beautiful. I think for myself, I would, the organization thing really resonated with me, so I'm going to stick with that. But yeah, I really appreciate your thoughts there. And yeah, thank you so much for playing these icebreaker games with me. I think that's all the time we have for this segment. So thank you so much for tuning in, be it on the live stream or otherwise. This has been the Windy City's Finest, on location with Mac and Perry. I'm Perry.
Welcome to the Windy City's Finest, on location with Mac and Perry. I'm Mac, he's Perry, and this is...
I'm Jen.
Well, thanks so much for chatting with me, Jen. So you are a cowboy poet, and we're going to learn all about cowboy poetry in my session here. I'm very excited to talk with you about it. Maybe to start, maybe just tell me just a little about yourself. Yeah.
Well, I guess life goes a little bit in chapters. Grew up on a farm, married an amateur roper, and of course was a farm wife then, and taught school after the kids left home basically, and retired from from being a teacher to being a granny nanny. Started a band and entertained at all the senior homes, and then started Medicine Hat Cowboy Poetry early in 2019.
2019. Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, you've done a lot. Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about the cowboy poetry side of things. So you're the president of the Cowboy Poetry, Medicine Hat Cowboy Poetry Foundation. Yeah. Yeah. And you said that started in 2019.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Nice.
Actually, even started a little bit earlier than that, but
Around
whenever.
there. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So and what does that involve with you running the foundation, being the president?
Well, to start with, it was finding people that were going to have a like interest, that wanted to as well. And fortunately, some really enthusiastic people came into my presence, which was a real godsend. Then, of course, starting from scratch, you don't have any money, so we each put in $100, so that was our beginning budget. Then we had a website, so another role for me was to be putting something on it, which was a whole something I hadn't really thought about. I only thought when I started this that we'd have an event once a year. But, well, and then not only stuff on the newsletter, but not on the website, but then a newsletter as well, so that's a regular thing. And well, then COVID came along not too long after, and we couldn't go to sing at the senior homes, so you felt for their isolation and felt for the change that it was for them, and thought, well, telephoning them would be, there's nothing contagious about telephoning. And then you discover that, my goodness, they have stories. And I was telling the president, the vice president at the time, who was the MC at the event, and she says, well, yeah, we have to get those down. We have to, and we're cowboy poetry, we have to do in poetry. So I was thinking, who would do this, She said, you will. I said, I will, and I did. And it's almost addictive. I mean, it's kind of a neat way a different way of telling a story. And anyway, I had to find sponsors. There was grant applications to learn how to do. There's budgeting that you learn how to do. And I've also been helping folks do memoirs. In fact, one of the ladies, we published her memoir. And right now I'm working with a lady helping her organize her memoir and encouraging her to write it. Yeah, when we started, she was 95. Now she's 96, and she's not in any hurry to get it all done.
Okay.
And anyway, those are kind of the roles that I've had over the course of time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a lot going on there. It keeps you busy, I'm sure. Do you have maybe if you could pick one, like a favorite role within being the president of the foundation?
Well, the least favorite.
Sure. Yeah. Well, okay. We'll start with that. What's the least favorite?
Would have been things like, doing the bylaws. Like, I'd never done that before. You have to, when you form a society, you need to do that. And I suppose the least, the hardest to do for me is to approach people and ask them for money, or ask volunteers, will you do this for me? Because but you need to do that kind of thing. My favorite thing is having performers be on stage, or reading a poem to a senior, for instance, that you've put their story into a poem, is seeing them just light up and almost sit up straighter. And there's just something that can't even compare to making someone feel that they count and that they're important and that their story, someone was interested enough not only to hear it, but to spell it back to them in poetry.
Yeah. It sounds like it's not necessarily about the poet themselves, but about that audience member and that reaction. So yeah, that's really lovely. Yeah, nice. Yeah. I guess we could talk more about the events, because they're I did attend the Medicine Hat Cowboy Poetry
Yes,
event.
you
And
did.
yeah, it was very impressive. There was a lot going on. There's many poets coming from all over, right? It's not just in Medicine Hat. They were
They
from
did. They came from
Saskatchewan
all over,
and
yeah.
Alberta and yeah.
Spy Hill, all the way from Spy Hill. What is that, 7 hours away? And he was coming just to come to the event.
Yeah.
I said, well, you might as well go on stage.
Yeah, okay. So he wasn't going to perform initially? Or?
No, he was just coming because he's a member.
Okay, yeah.
And we have members from Meadow Lake. We have members from Lethbridge. This year we have a member from Cranbrook. Yeah, I'm really hoping to expand on that. Because otherwise, it gets a little discouraging because it's a lot of work and sometimes isn't received as enthusiastically as you would hope, so having that kind of interest from that distance.
Mm-hmm. And you said it's not received enthusiastically. How so?
Well, people don't know what it is, and there's a lot of other stuff going on in the city. And this year, even the Canadian finals was the same weekend we had this. Like, really? When did you change that?
Yeah.
But, yeah, and people that do come really enjoy it. So hopefully it'll catch on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can say I went and I did very much enjoy it. We can talk lots about it, I'm sure. Yeah, that's interesting. So part of the foundation is also, sharing cowboy poetry with the larger community, right? To get more people out.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I think maybe we can talk about this more, but I do want to maybe get into specifics about cowboy poetry because people may not know what that is, and you're the person to talk to, absolutely. So I would just start with a very simple question of what is cowboy poetry?
Well, it depends who you're talking to. Everybody has a different interpretation of it. And as I was trying to figure out myself, what is it? I decided that we would just have our own definition. And generally speaking, I think it is measured rhythm and rhyme. Elko, which is the biggest gathering in the States, they allow free verse, but to me that doesn't quite fit my definition of it. And I think it's people writing their own stuff about their own escapades, their own experiences, their own feelings about things. And even if they choose someone else's piece to perform, they can really identify with it. It's something they're as passionate about as the person that wrote it. So often you don't even bother you're writing your own because someone else has done it so well. It's nice to be able to just, use theirs and of course give them credit for it. There's always that, giving the credit. I would say that it always has, I think, an important part of cowboy poetry is the preamble. The preamble is the part that where you before you do your performing it, it's like why you chose the piece or your connection to it or your experience, why you wrote it, like what happened to make you want to write it. I think that's always important. The other thing about cowboy poetry is the lingo. There's always they have really I don't know what kind of comparisons you call them, but ones that not usual comparisons. The language I find generally is relatively simple. It's just like ordinary conversational, but then it's in verse. And as some poets are doing this, they're giving their preamble, and before you know it, they're partway into their poem before you realize that, oh, there's the rhyme going on. And I find that it's a skillful thing to do, and certainly some of them do that so well that I think it's delightful. They quite surprise their audience by all of a sudden, oh, they're into the poem already, but anyway. Yeah, and I think it's unusual and literal ways of explaining things, not your usual way of saying it. that I think is kind of neat. Actually, one of the things is the lingo. Like this just happens to be an example of like some of the foods that get said.
Maybe let's bring it to the middle here, Jen.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, then we can see it a bit better.
Yeah.
Here's some examples of the lingo. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just about food. Did I change this?
No, you're good.
So like who would think that they were called these things, and yet they're so literal. I find the lingo delightful. Actually, it's part of the flavor of it, I think you would say, of cowboy poetry.
Yeah. Now I can't see them, but what's an example here?
Well, let's say onions, skunk eggs. Well, it's and splatter dabs for pancakes.
Okay.
Splatter dabs. Cow salve for butter. Like,
Sure.
weird, but somehow descriptive in a strange kind of way, an interesting kind of way, and literal, like quite, I don't know. That's the part that I really like about cowboy poetry.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, and that kind of makes me think of like, even just, obviously it's self-explanatory, it seems in the name, like cowboy poetry, but, the themes are largely around rural life, farming, ranching, things like that. So.
And not necessarily.
No? Oh, okay.
I think, see, and again, that's why I say this is my definition of it, or what Medicine Hat Cowboy, what we've established as ours is, that it's something you've experienced, something you're close to, something you're very passionate about, and something that can connect to your audience because you are passionate about it. So, I have seen cowboy poets do something about, I remember the one fellow talking about an orange. And by the time he was through with it, we all laughed. And it was cowboy poetry. Or the gal who talks about the washer and all of the things that the rancher puts in the washer. I mean, is that about land or cows or horses? No. But it's so that's why I think the topics can really vary. It's more on the person's connection to it and their enthusiasm about the topic. Because who can get excited about an orange? But by the time we were all through with it,
Right.
about cutting it, and it was absolutely, he just was a classic when he did that. And anyway.
Okay, nice. Yeah, and I guess, sure, it maybe doesn't have to specifically be about ranching specifically or farming specifically, but I guess what comes to mind is even like just certain values around that. I think about, the one fellow who did the one poem and it was about his drug problem, but it was being drug around by his ear, and it was really about family values and being raised a certain way, and so that's kind of what I was thinking of as well about cowboy poetry is often around those kind of values, would you say?
Wholesome, very wholesome values, yeah. And where a handshake is, you don't need any contracts, a handshake. And, and so when we moved to the city, that just wasn't the case. It was just strange to us, like really, because you grew up with that and couldn't believe that when you talk to the fellow and you're going to the fence between your property and his, that, yeah, sure, he'll share the cost of it. But then he decides to move and he says, well, why would I pay for it? I'm moving. Like, that's just not a country value. And I think the Ten Commandments in form, I have a paper hanging around here somewhere where the 10 Commandments are just like so literal. Just it's kind of neat. I don't know where I have them, but
it's
somewhere.
Fine. Yeah. And
but always it seems because we're country people, somehow it always connects somehow to the land or to animals or to ranchers or something like that. And I think another important part about cowboy poetry is always remember where it started, its history. I think remembering that helps. It's almost like a foundation, a grounding that cowboy poetry needs in order to be cowboy poetry. And that history to me is amazing. It started right after the Civil War. I didn't know all of this history. And there were a lot of animals, a lot of horses, and I just discovered that recently, that there were a lot of horses, but I did know there were a lot of cattle, Texas Longhorns, of course. Millions of them, because after when the Civil War was going on, they just became wild and free. And so when the Civil War was over, that's also the time, I guess, when the black people got their freedom as well. So a lot of the black people, as well as cowboys, they would trail these cattle, because now there's a market. They have to do something with all of these cattle anyway. They're a nuisance, right? But at the same time, there's a market for them, especially down east, and the reserves by that time were needing food. So these cattle needed to be trailed from Texas to, at first it was to Kansas. And these herds would be 1,000 to 3,000 cattle. Wow. Now you'd have to know, when cattle trail, they don't trail in a bunch. They trail kind of one behind the other. Now, can you imagine these cattle, 1,000 or even as many as 1,500 or 3,000, how long that string of cattle would be? Yeah. And there's only 12, at the most 15 cowboys that were trailing them. And of course, they're wild. They spook quite readily. So that's where all of the things would happen. And these cowboys sometimes be on the trail for a month or two, as much as 6 months. So, just picture these cowboys. What do you do? So around the campfire, of course, they would have all kinds of stunts, as guys would have, and I've read about a lot of those, and they would tell stories. But even during the day, while they're, there were lots of exciting times, but mostly very boring, going alongside of these, long trails of cattle. They would make up poetry, and then around the campfire, they would tell the poetry. And a lot of it would be about missing their sweetheart, and they would be ballads about stories, melodies that they heard from back home. But a lot of them would be about a certain horse, or it would be about the little Joe the Wrangler, that got killed in when they had a stampede and stuff like that. So that, to me, is the basis of cowboy poetry. If we remember that, then it helps us, to form a foundation upon which cowboy poetry is built. And it's about stories. Mm-hmm, yeah. They're telling stories, and it's an oral tradition. And I think that's an important part to remember.
Absolutely, yeah. Because it's not written down necessarily; it would be memorized. And
for many years, nothing was written down. I was just listening, and still am listening to not a podcast, but a YouTube, and for a long time, nothing was written down, and then some of the fellows started writing it down, but a lot of it was lost, just because it was only orally done.
Yeah. Yeah, and like you said, even now, maybe certain cowboys would share each other's poems or pass them along. And I assume that was happening back then as well, presumably. Yeah.
And then cowboy poetry too, when they came to town, they loved to entertain other outfits that were coming in, entertain anybody around town. And cowboy poets like Glenn Mackenzie was a Medicine Hat poet. He's passed on, of course, years ago, but I remember hearing him. If we were at a branding, we'd hear him. If we were at a banquet, he'd have his poem. And it was so nice because he didn't have to get a paper out. He just had them all in his head. And it was so entertaining. And I can just imagine this is what these cowboy poets were like. I mean, they knew this, and they loved sharing it with other people. It was part of their experience, but it was part of connecting with people. And to me, after you've been, so few guys on the trail for so long, you would love connecting with other people, and that would be a way to do it, right? Although they did shoot up the place everywhere they went to, and
Of course.
they got really wild when they got to the to the railheads. There's lots of stories about that too.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But that part isn't part of the cowboy poetry, let's say.
Fair enough. Well, I mean, it would be part of that because
It
that's
is
what
part
happened.
of the story.
Yeah, part
It
of the
is
history.
part of their story. Yeah, it is part of the history. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. And I mean, at the event, I didn't see anyone shooting anything up, so
No, they don't do that anymore. Yeah,
they've calmed down a little bit.
they
yeah.
have.
Yeah, but it seems like it's almost like became kind of part of their persona or personality of like, yes, they're ranchers, but they're also doing this poetry, and people kind of maybe started expecting it.
Well, it was kind of neat because listening to some of these podcasts, or I guess they're not podcasts, they're YouTubes, they were not well thought of. Well, when they came to town, my God, can you imagine? They're dirty. They haven't showered. Like, where would you shower? Well, there was a river once in a while, and that kind of thing. But when they got to town, they would shave up and stuff like that. But they were rough and tough, And I remember us being on a trail ride. I mean, we were on for, well, it was a week and a half, I guess, or almost 2 weeks. We were up in the mountains trail riding. And I mean, this might sound really silly, but it helps me to kind of put a picture in what it was like for them in those days, is that when we got into the hotel, my girlfriend and I, a ceramic toilet, like, it seemed like, and can you imagine what it was for them? Like, they seemed very uncivilized and that kind of thing. So I picture their cowboy poetry and their entertainment that way was a way in which they connected with, well, and there were lots of other people like that around too. And so they would share stories. But I think that way they also connected with the townspeople, the people that, they buy groceries with and, get a shave and a haircut and a bath and, everything else that they needed, and buy clothing that looked decent so they could go to the dances and, that kind of thing. So I think the cowboy poetry was a way in which it was a way in which they could fit in and share also with the other, the other outfits that came in. Because you can imagine all these cattle coming into town all at once?
Yeah, that'd be a lot, yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I guess, I don't know, do you have a sense like when it became more of like a formal thing where it's like an event where there's cowboy poetry happening, like I went to here in Medicine Hat?
Well, I do know that, I don't know the one in the States, at Elko, for instance, but I wish I knew the years. That's a good question. I'm curious now too. But I know all of a sudden they decided that maybe they should have a place where, people were doing this here, there, and somewhere else. But we should have a place where, everybody can get together. And that's how Elko started. And, because they wanted to, again, preserve the genre, because otherwise it would kind of get lost. So, a place where, like-minded and people with the same skills could get together, but also other people could enjoy it. So, and would be the same principle that I would have started it here. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, like Maple Creek used to have one all the time. It's not operating anymore. Even earlier than that would have been Pincher Creek. It's not anymore. Mm. Stavely doesn't have theirs anymore. They just, so they're. It's you don't want it to be a dying art, and it will be if someone doesn't do something. So here's me, foolish, like, why do I start something that everyone else is quitting? No, but it's tough. It's tough to establish something and to make it go. But there's a lot of people with a lot of skill that you're wanting to reach, and you're wanting also ordinary folk, city folk especially, to appreciate country, a genre that's purely country, I think, rural.
Mm-hmm, yeah. That's interesting because yeah, like when I was at the event in Medicine Hat, like I said, there was people coming from all over. You had poets from Saskatchewan and various places. So I kind of got the sense that like these events were happening elsewhere, but it sounds like that's not actually the case. That there are maybe fewer events happening.
Fewer all the time. Caroline has just started one, and they've got a really good one going. I don't know where they get all their funds. Believe me, they've got really good entertainers, and that's really, I guess, the goal that I would have, that it becomes, that people that are amateurs or even that are, professionals have, more professional, that have a place, to gather and to entertain not only each other, but, audiences, but that there'd be an evening performance in which you could afford to hire, the kind of entertainment that would draw, the local people to, yeah. But it always means sponsorships and stuff, and so, and of course that wasn't my favorite thing, remember?
Yeah.
But it's part and parcel of the whole. You kind of got to take the good with the bad, I guess, in order to make it happen.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're doing, trying to kind of preserve that history and that culture. Yeah, it can be a lot of work, especially if there are other places who aren't doing it anymore, and so that seems like quite a challenge.
And Tabor has just started one recently as well, so we're going closely with Tabor. High River has one going as well, but it's having less and less. It's a struggle for them too, and they've been operating for quite some time. So I think, well, if they're struggling and they've been in it for quite a while, what's in it for us? So it just means working harder. So yeah, lots of hours every day of my days goes into it because, well, I think it's something worthwhile to be working towards.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I guess, why do you think that is? If you had an idea of the case that maybe there aren't as many happening and it's hard to keep them going, do you have any ideas on why that might be happening?
Well, I think people generally are very, very busy. I think TVs have a way of, people are very comfortable. Like when you go to places in Europe, like just for instance, when my daughter and I were in Italy, in the evening, everybody is out and about. Yeah, you're shaking your head, sure. And that doesn't seem to be the case as much. And then there's always a lot of other things that are happening at the same time, like, that people have already gotten tickets ahead of time, or, and to me, I guess I'm biased, of course I'm biased, but, the kind of entertainment, like, this is just such from the heart kind of entertainment compared to, I don't know, but then of course I'm biased, so.
Yeah, because like when you were describing the original cowboy poetry, there wasn't a lot for entertainment back then in the places they were at, and I think live entertainment was obviously the only thing there was at that time. So it sounds like maybe certain technologies or other things kind of change. Because my sense when I was there, very much enjoyed it. But yeah, definitely there's definitely a demographic of people who looked like they were also cowboy poets, like lots of farmers or ranchers, and it seemed like it maybe appealed to them. And like you said, maybe someone from the city wouldn't consider that as a entertainment to go to. So yeah.
And also, it's one of the other difficulties is trying to get young people. Like the demographic is very, very much gray hair, and trying to get young people involved. And I've certainly tried that. I've tried through the 4-H clubs, and that's really tough because the kids that are in 4-H, you just have to realize that the parents are so busy, with the various projects, that doing one more project seems like you just don't want to burden. They're already doing so well with their kids. Like the 4-H club is just wonderful. Through the school, we have managed to do that as well. When we did it, when we had it at the Medicine Hat High School, we had some high school students involved. But that, like I don't have a school connection anymore. If I was teaching and, but I didn't even teach in the city of Medicine Hat, so that makes it, a little more difficult. And I've been out of it for so many years, so I don't have those connections. All of my great nieces, they've all written poems with me, and they've loved it, and they've performed. This year, every year I do a couple, at least one or even two, and this year I did two. This time they weren't able to be at our event. That's why we have open mic on the Friday night, so that people that just give it a try, a small audience, and they weren't able to come because they were barrel racing, which is good,
yeah.
but they're not part of this. So how to get young people involved? I'm working on it, but obviously don't have the answers yet. When we were, and it's getting out there. I'm very comfortable in my own little cozy house, but I guess that one of the harder things for me is to get out there and do things. One of the things when we were at the farmers market, some of the women that are homeschool, it seemed like that may be a means by which to access. They seemed much more open to wanting experiences like that for their kids. So that's my next step in terms of reaching towards a younger demographic. And of course the open mic has been nice. We had a girl that came from Empress, and she couldn't come on the day of, but drove all the way to Empress to in here to be on stage, and was really good. So it was a really nice way of accessing younger people, that are interested in doing open mic. So working at ways to access a younger group of people.
Yeah, no, obviously, that would be a challenge for sure. Yeah, and I definitely appreciate, even actually, I first met you downtown Medicine Hat. You're out, promoting it and letting people know about it, and I found you very approachable and you were very enthusiastic. So, yeah, I don't see why young people wouldn't want to be Involved. I think it's a very, very fun event, and it's a really interesting thing to do.
Yeah, the Seacans, the project that Medicine Hat did, we were at two of them. One, we celebrated history and the history of cowboy poetry. I think that's where I met you. And then right away the next week, it was celebrating music. So we were celebrating Western music. So the following week on the Saturday. So yeah, it's getting out there and doing that, but it takes a lot of energy. By the time the event is over, I'm thinking, I don't know if I can do this anymore, because it does take a lot to make it happen and to advertise it and that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I mean, doing things like this is always great too, so I appreciate you making the time to chat with us. Yeah, I think we've got time for maybe one more question. And this is going to it's the last question that we usually ask. It's a deep question, but how would you say that cowboy poetry or being involved with the foundation, how has that changed you as a person? Can you think you could answer that?
It changed me to being more public than probably I'm used to, or that I would choose to be, but need to be. And it's a good thing. I've met so many wonderful people, and so many connections that have really been beautiful connections, people I really appreciate knowing. What else did it change me? Oh, well, gosh. Computer skills. The girls that were with me, they were just so patient, and some of the things, I'm sure they just shake their head it's so simple, but I didn't know that. So I guess computer skills have certainly improved. Writing skills, I never ever considered myself a writer, and yet I enjoy that. Of course, doing the poetry, just the research, discovering things, exploring and discovering is so fun. It's like a treasure hunt. Like when you find, just as a for instance, I was thinking about the very first rodeo. Of course, Medicine Hat had an early rodeo, but they always say Raymond was first, and of course Calgary was 1912. That was after that. So I'm thinking, inputting first rodeo, so discovering things on the computer, and yeah, it always said that there was this one place in the States that had very first rodeo. Yeah. And then I found the names of the 3 cowboys that were at the first rodeo, where it was, the names of the ranches they came from. Well, I just felt like I had been to second heaven. Sounds really weird, but it's like finding a nugget, a gold nugget, and then putting it to poetry. It was just like, it just was the best thing in the world. Like, weird, I know.
So you were able to make some poems out of
I
that?
do, I do. I have that one in a poem. Just because, I didn't know all that stuff. But it's interesting, the song that I sang about the bull. Yeah. A bull rider came up to me. He says, yeah, I knew all about, I heard all about Crooked Horn. Yep. But where did you find that all that information? And I think that's the neat part, is that it kind of adds to what they already know about something, I discovered too that Bill Pickett actually started bulldogging by biting them on the nose. Now, I don't know if you know Bill Pickett. See, you're too young to know about that. But anyway, he was an entertainer. He was in Calgary. I'm sure he was in Medicine Hat. And the Wild West show. He was part of that. And just a real athlete. And he was Negro. And, he was banned from a lot of rodeos and stuff, but he still became famous. But how he started by calling it bulldogging is that, just discovering this story, to me, it's so neat. So he's just, as a 10-year-old, he's already working full-time as a cowboy. And down there, they couldn't lariat to bring down, a steer or bull or anything like that. They had to use bulldogs. And bulldogs would bite them on the nose to subdue them. And so he saw this. So one time he didn't have his hounds with him, and lo and behold, this bull apparently, of course, can you go by the truth or not? But, I found it there. Just because it's written doesn't mean it's true, but it makes for a good story. And so anyway, this bull takes after his horse, and the only thing he can think of to subdue that bull is do the same as the bulldog did. And he bit it on the nose and subdued it and saved the situation. Well, he did that hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times as part of his act. And he'd do lots of other things. But he's the only cowboy, Bill Pickett, the only cowboy that has a rodeo event in his name. He's the only one that... And so, who knew? And so I guess that's what I like about the research part, is that you discover these things that you just think, wow, I'm sure someone else would like to know just as much as I do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I'm glad that you're able to do that.
Yeah.
And actually, that's a good segue to the next segment, which will be the showcase. We're actually we're gonna hear some cowboy poetry. So, yeah, I think that's all the time we have for this segment. This has been the Windy City's Finest on location with Mac and Perry. I'm Mac. He's Perry, and this is.
I'm Jen. Takes its own sweet time.
Welcome once again to the Windy City's Finest on location with Mac and Perry. My name is Perry, he's Mac, and this is...
I'm Jen.
Yes, and I'm super excited to jump into our showcase. Getting to listen to you talk about cowboy poetry got me really inspired, and so I am super excited to dive in. I love poetry, and so I'm very interested in the genre of cowboy poetry. And my understanding is that the foundation that you're a part of, you've actually been able to publish certain books here,
Yes.
which are a collection of poems, as I understand. And I think the first one that I wanted to dive into really quick was this one here, and it's Country Stories. And I might flip through the index here, but what could you tell me about this one specifically?
Well, Country Stories was, it was actually still during COVID, and I was interviewing seniors because we couldn't sing at the homes with our band. And so another way of connecting with seniors was talking to them, finding their story, and writing a poem about their story, and videoing them. So on our website, we have videos of many of these. But in addition to that, we decided to put it into a book. So there would be a picture of the person I talked to, and then I'd be writing a bio about them. Their biography would always include things that that are interesting, and maybe how they played, or songs that they sang, or activities that they did, or the responsibilities that they had. So I always tried to include a little bit of history in their bio, so that it becomes not just the story of them, but a story about times and what times were like. And then, of course, the poem about their story. The interesting thing about this, because it was all done by telephone, is that you would, of course, consult with them and make sure you got all the details right. So you did lots of checking with them, lots of telephone calls, the interview first, the checking whether you got the information right for their bio. You'd write the poem, and maybe you didn't have some of the details quite right, but you'd talk to them and share their poem. And then when we put it into a book, like we videoed some of them, but when they were in a book, then we would get a print sponsor, someone who sponsored the printing of the book, and then that would be a fundraiser for us, selling the book.
Amazing, right? And I just want to clarify: this is Country Stories, or are we on Stories from Seniors?
They're almost the same.
Oh, okay, very interesting.
But
okay.
interesting how that came about.
Yeah.
Kind of Stories from Seniors is what we started with.
Right.
So then it was a new year, and we decided we had already, gone into this, and we were talking to more seniors, and COVID was still in progress, let's say. So I was actually talking to a fellow and a gal, and she was, she was probably early 80s. It seems funny to me now, but she was early 80s. And her only problem was that she did not want to be called a senior. So I said, she didn't want to be in a book that's called Stories from Seniors.
Right.
So I said, do you have another suggestion? She says, well, why don't you just call it Country Stories? She wasn't a senior, and she wasn't about to be called one.
Right.
Yeah, she's over 80.
Yeah.
So that's how Country Stories came to be. It's simply a continuation of Stories from Seniors.
I see.
So it's really not much different.
No, that's totally fair, and I appreciate that, being mindful of how people want to be addressed. That's totally fair. And I also I recall you talking about something with in your segment with Mac of stories of like times, and kind of trying to capture that in some way, shape, or form. That isn't just like a photo, in more of a unique way potentially. And so I really appreciated that. And one thing also striking me is just the number of people involved in this one, and I'm assuming the first one as well. And just, can you tell me a little bit about that process of reaching out to people? And is it fun reaching out to people? Are there challenges? Or what do you,
Well, it was fun to be able to talk to them, because these are COVID times, and you recognized and you heard lots of stories about how people were isolated. Well, so one example is one of the gals that I knew that is at Chinook Village. she knew other people in there that had stories. So she found a few of the people for me that had stories. And then it turned out that we had a time in which they offered us the little entrance to do our videoing. So these folks would come one at a time, and we were only allowed to be in that little entrance, lots
Right.
of lights, so we were very fortunate light-wise.
Yeah.
And these people, instead of thinking about their ailments, because they're seniors that, all of them, one gal is even partially, well, almost totally blind.
Right.
And so they would be spending weeks deciding with their daughters, they'd be telling us, deciding what to wear, and then changing their mind, making their appointment for their hair. One, like Cheryl and I, we'll treasure this forever, where the glass door is, a fellow was coming with his wife, and we could see him. It was like a mirror in a way. And so when he was coming, he was checking his tie, and he was doing his hair like this before he comes through the glass door for his turn to do the interview. And it was so delightful to see these people not worrying about being isolated, but, thinking about, and of course they were thinking about, their interview and hearing their poem. And it was such a celebration. And what a beautiful thing for them to have at their stage in life. And the best part of it is how many of these people that we've interviewed have passed on. And so their stories are permanent now, otherwise they would be lost with them. So did we get off topic?
No, I think that was pretty astute of you. Yeah, no, I really appreciate that insight. And yeah, I just love what you're saying about, seeing people. The word that came to mind is shine. You know what I mean? Those
Yes.
little moments. And it's not like, being on stage necessarily. Sure, there's like a camera and it's being recorded, but it's like those little moments of people like shining and just being alive. You know what I mean? I love that. So,
And that
yeah.
their story is important.
Yes.
Not only was it important enough for us to, to write it down and to write a poem about it, but now to be like on TV, like, you know what I mean, on camera. And it's an opportunity that some of them never ever had a chance otherwise.
No, I think that's really beautiful. And I think that's, one of the greatest things that is potentially coming from technology, you know what I mean? And like, so I really appreciate that. And it sounds like we're going to come back to some of that stuff when we get to the last one here, but I just want to jump quickly to our next one, which was, this one, Pause and Poems. So this was another book published, and I was just really curious what you could tell me about what's in that one.
Well, that was an interesting one. We never knew. Everything seemed to evolve very organically. We didn't really have a plan. And we were kind of at the end of we didn't know if we were at the end of country stories, but we had done quite a number of them. And we were actually doing an interview at the Red Cliff Legion, who were very generous to us in using their facility. Yeah. And these dogs came in on the side. They didn't interrupt us. We had rented the room, but they, and then these dogs walked out again. And that was the morning. In the afternoon, these dogs came in, and lo and behold, one, and I thought, because we did all of these interviews back to back, because of course we've rented the room, and we're taking advantage of the space. Totally. And we had everybody back to back, and the one didn't show. And I thought, really, everybody, everything's set up like this is not good. And lo and behold, these dogs are walking out again, like just along the side, like one behind the other, leading their dog. Well, we got nothing else to do except go over and see what they're all about. that was the beginning of Paws and Poems.
Amazing.
Because they were, Jamie Billings, he was working with Meliora dogs then. He's doing a wonderful project about, dogs. And he trains and he finds dogs. He supports these people that need service dogs, people with PTSD, people with diabetes, all of these, that really couldn't survive without having a service dog. And he is the hub. He's the one. Even now, every Saturday, he has a time from 9 to 11, I believe, and he meets at this certain place, and anybody that wants to brings their dog, and he helps train the dog. And it was just amazing. So what we did then, Paws and Poems ended up talking to various people who had service dogs. And we even did a bio of the dog. Of course, the dog was just as important.
Yeah.
And what we learned was unbelievable. One of the gals, her dog was only, I don't know, did she say 6 months old? Young. And she came home from work and was just laying on the couch. And the dog tried to wake her up, but he couldn't. Went into the other room to wake up her partner. And finally, the dog wouldn't leave him alone. He came out and she would have lost her life. She has diabetes, had diabetes ever since she's 3.5. Now she's a young adult now. And she'd always been able to tell when her blood sugars were low. I'm assuming that's what it was.
Yeah.
But as she got older, a thing was happening where she couldn't sense that anymore, but she didn't realize it. The dog saved her life.
Wow.
And 3 times that dog has saved her life. Wow. Like she talks about one time she was going for a walk and the dog just insisted she come back, and she finally thought, okay, and realized the dog knew, And same with the fellows with PTSD. Like, it's just amazing what the dogs, how they will help. So we learned that.
Yeah.
But then, I don't know if we kind of some of the people had moved away, and they are people that, have been traumatized, a lot of them by war, and other means of fire. One of them was, the dog was even traumatized by fire, by a fire, but the dog actually saved their life. So, but we realized that to make a book, we kind of didn't have enough material. So I started researching things like the coyote. And if you look at the table of contents, there's one about mice. There's one about the bobcat, an urban bobcat, their side of the story. Like, they have this part too. I'm trying to think some of the others that I have in there. But like other animals, the bobcat. Anyway, there's the coyote. Yeah, I said that one. Yeah. So there's other animals with paws that I did the research. Gophers. That's the one, the gophers. And I did a satire on gophers. But in it included all of the things about gophers. I didn't know that they don't like high grass. I didn't know there's certain flowers that they didn't like. And a lot of people that read it, of course, we have a lot of this stuff on our website as well. And I've had more comments about the gophers. They said, because it's a common gopher, we all know what a gopher is. Yeah. But there's so many things that I learned that sharing it was so neat to have other people. I really enjoyed discovering all this stuff about gophers.
No, I love that sense of exploration that it sounds like you get out of this. And specifically back to like the dogs, I think we talked about in our icebreakers, horses and the relationships and bonds that you can build with them and the senses that they have. It's almost like a sixth sense sometimes. And so I love that that's kind of, in a way, captured in this publication. But we would be remiss if we didn't get to some cowboy poetry. So I'm going to move us swiftly along to our third book over here, but I understand that was probably the first one, The Stories with Seniors.
But we were all done. We kind of combined the two together.
Yeah, and so hopefully if you feel comfortable sharing the piece of poetry from this one.
Well, it isn't from this one. Oh, yes, it is from this one.
Yeah.
It is. Yes, it is. Herb Krause, he is a fellow, he lived out by Hilda. And this is kind of the preamble that cowboy poets do.
Love
Where
it.
did it come from? Well, these were his neighbors. And as he's growing up, he hears this story, and he's always remembered the story. He's one of these fellows that has many stories. And it was amazing to me that I have heard this story from so many other sources. It has a little bit about cattle rustling in it. And in particular, the concept that this is, I won't give it away, but here it was somebody who actually talked about those neighbors and by name and knew them. And so it was kind of neat to capture this. And what is really neat is that he has passed on now. And it's good that it is down on black and white paper. Absolutely. It's called Neighbors and True Friends. A threesome were neighbors, close friends through the years, but sometimes things got kind of tense. 'Cause farming's for profit and poker's for keeps, but their friendship, it always showed good common sense. Now, most every Sunday they'd have them a game, while the others would head off for church to show off their new clothes and wear their best manners and the news of the week there to search. Mac, he was a bachelor. No wife there to nag him and tell him that gambling's a sin. Mac wasn't good at the ranch side of life, but at poker, he often would win. He didn't keep cattle. They need feed all winter, and summers you'd waste making hay. Horses? Good keepers that fend for themselves. With his wood leg, near home he would stay. Now Dave and his wife, they lived a few miles due east. On afternoon Sundays, he'd help out poor Mac. Came with horse and a buggy and money to gamble. Well, he lost all three in a game of blackjack. There was always a visit as part of the deal. Then the rest of them noticed that Dave is gone. They just caught him hitching the team to sneak off, the team that Mac had rightfully won. Mac got so mad, "That's my stuff you're stealing." Then he dunked Dave's head in manure. He kicked Dave's rear end with his stiff wooden leg. Dave had to walk home, that's for sure. It was only days later that Mac gave it back. It was Dave's only cart and best mare. "I was planning to give it back right away. Didn't want your wife knowing about your gambling affair." Now, Hargrave had pasture right up to old Mac's, was the wealthiest rancher around. And Mac, with his bum leg, got hungry for beef. So, the odd time, stray dogies he found. It was early in summer when Hargrave dropped by. Did his friend need some groceries from town? Of course they would have them a good game of cards. The loss Hargrave suffered was hard to live down. To help him feel better, Mac offered him lunch. "I'll fry you the best steak around." Mac hobbled to the barn where the carcass was hung. The green part he cut off and threw to the hounds. Hargrave praised Mac. "This is such good steak. Of the steaks that I've had, this one's the best." When Mac said that it was his own meat he ate, you could say that his neighbor friend wasn't impressed. The groceries Mac ordered were brought the next day. The bill, I don't know, must have got lost. Two neighbors would always look out for old Mac, though there were times friendship boundaries were crossed.
I know in poetry they do this. No, thank you so much for sharing that. I love that the character's name is Mac.
Yeah, right, there's Mac behind the camera.
But yeah, no, that's super interesting. And one thing I wanted to point out, like more specifically about the poetry, and I think you mentioned this with your conversation with Mac, but it's that kind of structure. I was hearing of like the A-B kind of rhyme scheme. Is that like your go-to? Is that what most of you follow? Or do you like to choose a rhyming scheme, or is it just
Oh,
whatever
no.
comes out?
You start with a line that's the hardest part, is finding the first line. And then the rhythm of the story just seems to gallop along.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you're halfway through and you got a really good rhythm going down here.
Right.
And then you go back and you make this match this down here.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's AA, BBA. Sometimes AB, AB. Sometimes AA, BB. I don't know. Sometimes long lines, sometimes short, but conversational is the big thing.
Right.
And I think the big thing to remember about cowboy poetry that I think I forgot to mention earlier is that there's that little hook at the end. There's often that little, the ending that is unexpected maybe, or it just catches you by surprise. I think that's the one thing that I like about cowboy poetry.
Yeah. No, I think that's awesome, and I think we got to hear some of those things in this piece here. And I think that is unfortunately all the time we have for this segment, but I'm super glad that we got to talk about each of these and actually hear a piece. So thank you so much for sharing with us.
You're welcome.
Yeah, this has been the Windy City's Finest, on location with Mac and Perry. I'm Perry, he's Mac, not Mac from the poem.